What's going on, guys? I have this lovely trio of Turin grinders from Espresso Outlet. I did an unboxing video on this new lime green Turin grinder. I've had this V1 white Turin grinder for quite some time. For the most part, they're pretty much identical. Has a little bit different clump buster, and if you watched Hoff's videos, he didn't like the font, so the V2 has the updated font style. If you have the V1 and you want to upgrade it, Espresso Outlet actually sells the upgraded dials, so that's pretty cool. They're pretty cheap. I think they're like less than $5. And big difference between these two really is just some light mods. I've tried to keep this pretty much stock just for test purposes, but have a little custom lid. And right out the box, the one thing that annoyed me was the dial or the arrow setting. There's actually like a little coffee bean right here, and you're kind of supposed to imagine a line all the way up to that setting. Print it off this dial. You can visit www.portakeeper.com. I sell them there in a lot of different colors: black, white, silver. Those are the big colors. And upon request, these cup tilters are really cool too, but that's really not the point of this video. The main point of this video is I've already installed the cast burrs. I'll show you a picture of those. I'll put it up on the screen. I installed the cast burrs in this white V1, and I'm actually going to do these red speed burrs from SSP. These also came from Espresso Outlet. I have a third set, and it's unimodal burrs. I'm going to try to do a side by side. They look kind of the same. These are the unimodal. These are the red speed. They both have the red titanium coating. I think it's titanium. There is a little bit of burr geometry. You can look at the angles and actually how deep the cuts go through. And there's actually some fine cuts, and I've got some really cool videos coming on that. But I'm going to go with these red speed burrs that are specific for espresso. So let me grab a screwdriver. I'll show you how I install burrs. You guys might have some that's just a little bit off and you have to shim it. I'm hoping I don't have to shim mine, but we're going to try it out. Just a sec. So to start things off, I've taken these grinders apart. I have other videos where I go pretty in depth taking it apart, so pretty familiar with taking it apart. It's a really simple grinder to open up. You have your lid that just pops off, and your bellow just pulls out. It's pretty simple. I usually just leave them together, and we'll put to the side. The top unscrews. We're going to go counterclockwise. When you get to the end, it just lifts off. So there's the dial. It actually has a protective coating on it still that I'm going to peel off. But it's a nice heavy piece of aluminum. It's like a cast piece of aluminum. And we'll set that to the side. And here's your upper burr carrier. And it kind of pops into some springs. These are the burrs that come with your grinder. Similar, but there's quite a few differences really. These are a little bit more aggressive, and the cut quantity or the cut quality on these, at least on my first set, these are pretty high-end nice burrs from SSP. So you can pull that off, and then you have your other burr. It's in the bottom. There's some springs. You want to make sure that they don't pop out. It's kind of fit on the inside. We're going to use a Phillips head screwdriver. I kind of have a multi-purpose. You guys probably have something like this around your house. And we're just going to loosen up these burrs. Now, I don't know if the V2 is like the V1, but the top screws and the bottom screws on my other DF64 were actually different lengths. So you'll want to make sure, we'll find out here in a second, but we'll want to make sure that we don't use the wrong ones on the wrong side. Also, the burrs that come with it, there's not really a top and a bottom burr, I don't believe. At least my first one was not marked. I did mark it with Sharpie when I pulled it out. Let's see. So there's no marking on the back. I don't think there's any markings on the sides. But on these SSP, you'll notice that there is actually a thing that says top and bottom. So these are about the same thickness, surprisingly. I thought they were a little bit thinner, which is kind of interesting. I'll have to check. Let me grab these other ones. No, these are my V1s, so they're the same thickness. They're pretty close, but I do know when you put the SSP in, your zero is going to be slightly off. So you can see in the background I have my arrow, it's sticking way off to the side. On my original Burrs, it was pretty much straightforward with zero. After I put the SSP in, I put it to the side. That's what's nice about buying these extra dials. Or if you're really good, you can take like a hairdryer or heat gun and pull those off and reposition at zero. I'd recommend you do that. So there's the original Burr. We'll put that to the side. And we want to make sure to get the one, I forget what they call this one. It's like rotating or top. I guess they call it top. I think another one has a different name. So we want the top burr for this piece, and normally I like, before I take a grinder apart, I like to mark the orientation. So if I took it apart this way, I'd maybe put like a Sharpie line at the top and on there, just so that when I reassemble it, I don't accidentally rotate it 90 degrees, because that could throw off your zero. Since this is the first time putting these in, I kind of don't care, because we're going to zero it anyway if it's not centered. And they just fit into place like so. So let's tighten this. I'll leave one screw out because I'm kind of curious to see if the top and bottom are different on this grinder. I don't want to tighten it all the way. I just kind of want to get it loose. Oh man, these are tight. There we go. They actually seem like a slightly bigger screw than the V1 as well. So these are the same length. On the V1 they are different lengths, so just know that. And I will loosely put all these together. There it is, pretty loose. Has a little bit of movement in there. It's mostly in a circle, not side to side. But that could play into some of the adjustments that we do. And I'm actually just going to kind of like, when you tighten a car tire, go in a circle and do a little bit at a time just to get some even distribution on the screws. And they don't need to be very tight. Like it looks like I'm maybe cranking on it, but I'm actually just very gently snugging them up, because this is aluminum. And while it's pretty nice aluminum, aluminum does strip out pretty easy. So make sure not to over tighten. It's not worth it. You really don't need to over tighten. A lot of burr, or I guess grinder manufacturers, they use slotted screws because they're actually a little bit harder to torque down. I've been told they do that on purpose. I don't know if that's true, but I have noticed a lot of grinders have slotted screws. Okay. So, kind of difficult to get out. I don't really want to mess up the edge of these burrs. That's all the way out. Well, let me find. I was hoping it'd come out easier than this. Ideally, you don't want to take like a screwdriver and pry it from the side, because you might end up damaging the outer edge if you ever wanted to reuse these burrs. Let me go find something. A little popsicle stick or something. Okay, nothing fancy. I just got a little wood stir stick. It's kind of like what you stir your creamer into coffee, which we don't do. But I use it for mixing epoxy. So kind of pop that burr out as gently as you can. I'm going to mark this as the bottom. I don't know if it really matters, but might as well. We'll put that to the side. And let's mount this bottom burr. So we'll want to make sure to get it as close as we can to the holes. This is actually going in a lot smoother than the V1. I can tell they've really perfected some of the things that they've machined. It doesn't look any different, but it's just going together a lot easier. And again, I'm just going to snug these down. I don't want to get too crazy. Again, doesn't need to be too crazy. So there is our top and bottom burrs installed. So it looks pretty nice with these Red Speed Burrs. I really kind of like the look. Not like you'll see them very much, but the coating does make them last quite a bit longer. I like the cutting pattern on it quite a bit more. Now, we just place it on top. Like I mentioned, if you have it indexed, I'd pretty much always index it the same way. Maybe we'll do this front corner. That way, if I ever reassemble it and it's like that, I know it's wrong. It's kind of on some grease, so that might not hold up, but you can definitely mark it before you pull it out. And what I like to do, sometimes I kind of press down the collar. And getting these fine threads to catch can take a minute. But there, it's caught. I want to move the camera. We're going to show you how I like to check for burr alignment. This doesn't work on every type of burr. Like, it's not going to work on those cast burrs very well, and it's not going to work on these unimodal burrs that well. It'll work, but if you look really close, there's some extremely fine surfaces. It's not a flat surface like these espresso burrs. See how these have like big flat areas on them? So what we'll do is we'll use a dry erase marker and we'll actually paint these flat surfaces so that when they rub together, it'll wipe off evenly or just on one side. And that's how we know if it's centered or not. When you have these that have the little tiny ridges, you can still kind of tell, but it's much more difficult to see where it's worn off. So these can be a little bit more tricky. These should be pretty easy. These actually have flat surfaces. So let me get my camera readjusted. Okay, before we put this down all the way, I recommend getting a dry erase marker. These wipe off really easy and will wipe off this metal. So we have these flat surfaces, and what we want to do is color them in just whatever color. Green in this case matches this new grinder. A lot of times it'll be black. I recommend like a red or a green or black, something that's like real dark. We just want to get all of them. And make sure I'm kind of rubbing it off on the bottom. Make sure you're not rubbing it off. So there we have all of them coated. Let's do the bottom real quick. So this method doesn't really do much. I'll do an example. Doesn't do much for the side to side, but it does do a lot for this. So if your top burr is just slightly crooked compared to your bottom burr, you can shim it. If it's going to be like very minorly off. It's going to be very hard to see on this style, but if you really wanted to mess with it, you could probably play with it. You can look up some other methods online. It's a lot more difficult, but we're just going to go with this for now. Let's use our index mark because we want them to be the same way, the same orientation every time. Grab you that Sharpie. Make sure it's good and dark. And then let's put it back together. So again, what we're trying to do is where the coloring is on these flat parts, when they rub together, we're going to hand turn this grinder. When they rub together, it's going to wear off some of that green. And what we're looking for is that green to be evenly worn off. If it's not evenly worn off, that means that that one area needs to be adjusted. So the best way, a lot of people use sometimes paper. I'd say foil is probably a little bit better. Hopefully you don't need thicker than like one piece of foil, because that means you're quite far off. We're just going to do this. You can kind of check it every once in a while, give it a little spin. Keep tightening it, give it a little spin, because you don't want these to hit. And I can feel it starting to get some resistance right here. Let's see. We might have one full additional turn. So this collar does not adjust very easy. Oh, we're getting close. So there it is. It's pretty much touching, but it's just barely lifted off. And I want to give it a few spins. And we want to make sure to spin it all the way around, because we want to make sure that all the pieces of the little triangles on those cutting surfaces make contact with each other to rub off that green. If you don't think they're quite touching, you can keep, I'm kind of inching it back down. You don't want to do this while it's running. You might damage your burrs. So we've turned that quite a few times. Let's pull it off. We'll give it maybe one more. And here's the moment of truth. So you can see mine needs some alignment. It wiped off this entire side, but it left all the other side. So what does that mean? It means that this side needs to be shimmed up just a little bit. Is that right? It needs to be shimmed. This side needs to be shimmed up a little bit. Yeah, I can get you a little bit turned around. I always have to think it through. So let me go get some stock to shim this. This is where things can get a little bit interesting. When we take this burr off or loosen it up, we want to make sure that we're not taking it all the way off. So what I really want to do is I probably want to put one, maybe two layers of foil by each screw. And I got some aluminum foil. It's the standard aluminum foil from your kitchen. I'm going to use some scissors and cut some shims. And what I'm going to do is fold it over. I mean, this is really thin. It might be too much. And we're going to make a double layer shim. I'm thinking that might be what it needs. So there's one. There's two. So there's our two shims. And then what I want to do is we want them in that area. So let's loosen this up. And we'll want to make sure that's the same orientation as before. Let's pop these screws out. So we don't want to accidentally rotate it, for example. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull it up. We're actually going to shim it. I think I just kind of folded it. These might be almost too big. The very small shims. Cut this one too. We're going to put it at the back. And then without rotating that, we want to make sure that we have it in the same holes as before. Now let's tighten things down. So this is 2 layers on those 2 corners. Don't want to get too tight. I'm hoping this will be all it needs. It's still extremely close, but we want to get it perfect. These are $180 burrs. You have your new DF64 Turin. We want to make sure that it's nice and perfect. So one more time, let's mark these. Okay, let's hope this did it. And I would consider that pretty much perfectly aligned. You have a little bit of the green residual, it's actually on the cutting surface. So I'm very happy with that. There is your bottom. That was with 2 layers of foil. If you're worried about this marker, it comes off really easy. You can probably use like a barista brush, get some of it off, use your finger. If you run just a couple coffee grounds through it as you're breaking it in, it'll get all that off. It's not a big deal. So for the last time, we want to use our index mark and reassemble it. And there will be a lot more videos to come showing you these. These are the Red Speed Burrs that are for espresso. So I'm going to make a dial marker. I want to re-zero this. You can see when I change the burrs, the 0 mark is not exactly 0, kind of like on this other grinder. Let's tighten it down. We're getting pretty close to 0 right there. I can feel it. There's 0. So that's how I like to align my burrs. Again, it doesn't really help you with the side to side, so if your burrs are a little bit side to side, it does more just the angles of the burrs with this method. I think you're going to be extremely happy with this grinder as well as these burrs. I've been using these cast burrs upstairs, and these Red Speed Burrs are really impressive. I've used some similar ones in this K30. They're not SSP, they're Boyts, but they're pretty awesome burrs. Until you've had some really nice burrs, it makes a big difference. The Adam 75 that I rave about has some pretty nice burrs in it as well. So there it is. Here's the full lineup. You have my original V1 DF64, I have the V2 DF64 Turin, and then I have the brand new from Espresso Outlet. It's the SD40, and it is a conical burr grinder. I need to be doing more videos on this. I've just been super busy, but it's a really cool grinder. I've been really kind of surprised how small it is. These are not very big grinders. This thing is tiny. It's really awesome. Sounds a little bit different. It has a gearbox, but I think it's a really cool grinder. So make sure to subscribe. That helps me out, especially if this video helped you. I know it got really long, but I thank you guys for watching. Let me know if you got a DF64. Let me know if you got the SSP Burr upgrade. These came from Espresso Outlet. The grinders also came from Espresso Outlet. Joe's always done me really good. And I really thank him a lot for everything that he does for me and just for the community as a whole. So thank you for watching. I'll talk to you soon.